Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from our Telesur studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with our news, but first, we check out our headlines. Cuba announced recovery measures to face post-pandemic stage. In China, floods and mudslides uprooted hundreds of thousands of people from their homes in South China. Ivory Coast starts preparation for the October 31st elections. We begin with our news. You stay with us. In Cuba, the Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel presented the Caribbean country's first stage of recovery following the coronavirus outbreak. The Cuban president noted that their strategy to confront this period of the pandemic has been prepared consisting of two stages. The first is the post-COVID-19 recovery, which implies returning to a certain normality while maintaining measures that have proven effective in preventing the spread of the virus. The president explained that over the next few days, each and every measure and action will be ready to be implemented at the appropriate time.
I believe that the new mission, the new challenge that we have, which will also be the final result of what we have achieved, is to avoid that in the new stage this virus becomes endemic. We will continue de-escalating with the intention that COVID-19 does not become endemic. We will enter a stage in which we will live with the presence of cases and patients, the presence of the virus in certain proportions, and in the midst of a global fight. On the other hand, it is probable, as has been seen internationally, that there will be a resurgence of COVID-19 between September and November. It is a prediction of the model, and therefore we are also going to work to avoid that new outbreak.
Meanwhile, the Cuban Prime Minister Manuel Marrero Cruz detailed the measures to resume activities in the healthcare system.
In the first phase, all hospital services will resume at 50% of capacity. In the second phase, 75% of hospital services will be reestablished. And in the third phase, hospitals will offer all services as normal. The same will occur with the stomatology-related services, which will also begin at 50%, then 75% until the complete reestablishment of services.
Moreover, Prime Minister Marrero Cruz explained the specific measures for the tourist sector for the post-COVID-19 stage.
We are preparing to start receiving international tourism. First, at the border, a specific protocol will be applied when the first tourists arrive. A PCR test will be applied and travelers' temperatures will also be taken, among other protocols. International tourism will begin in the second phase, but with one peculiarity, that is, we will only begin to receive the first international tourists in the north and south keys of the country. Specifically, the first destinations would be the keys of Santa Maria, Cayo Coco, Cayo Guillermo, Cayo Cruz, and Cayo Largo del Sur. These would be the only destinations in that second phase, which is when international tourism enters.
Moving on to Venezuela, this Thursday, President Nicolás Maduro declared Venezuela as the only country in the world that is actually receiving thousands of its citizens from abroad in the middle of the pandemic, while claiming that the government of Colombia is carrying out a plan to infect the Bolivarian nation with COVID-19.
Venezuela is the only country in the world that is receiving thousands of citizens at this time. They come on foot, even from Peru. Imagine, that was only done by our liberators 200 years ago from Ecuador, Colombia, Cali, Medellín, Bogotá, and Bucaramanga. And I need to mention Iván Duque's plan. He is desperate. You can see in the face of Porky. His beady little eyes, because they could not infect Venezuela, and he goes out to lead a worldwide campaign against Venezuela. Venezuelans are entering to the country according to plan, according to our schedule, and they are all welcome with open arms.
President Maduro also stated that the return of nationals from neighboring countries has been caused by xenophobia, unemployment, and the lack of policies to address the pandemic.
They come on foot, desperate with their families, after facing xenophobia, persecution, unemployment, the coronavirus, hunger, and they come to their homeland because they know that here they have everything they need. They are treated for free upon arrival. They are tested, they are fed, they are housing, and their transportation back home is free. Meanwhile, in Colombia, they are charged even to walk.
The Venezuelan president also indicated that if there were to be a vaccine against COVID-19 soon, it would be guaranteed for all the countries that make up the Bolivarian Alliance of the Peoples of Our America.
We are announcing it right now. We will guarantee a vaccine for the ALBA, for all the countries that make up the ALBA, as soon as one is available. We will guarantee for our people. That is why the ALBA exists.
And the executive power of the Dominican Republic has requested the National Congress to approve an extension of the state of emergency by 17 days to prevent possible resurgence of COVID-19 in the country. Meanwhile, President Danilo Medina announced that the state of emergency plans to continue until June 1st, taking into account the strengthening of sanitary controls. The opposition has, however, rejected the request by the executive, and it claims that the government wants to use it as an advantage for the next general elections scheduled for June 5th. So far, the health authorities have recorded more than 21,000 cases and 561 deaths from the viral outbreak in the Caribbean nation. And the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, accused the WHO, the World Health Organization, of attacking its economy due to the health recommendations. President Bolsonaro said the WHO had begun an alleged plan to break the Brazilian economy by calling on government to implement a quarantine to avoid the COVID-19. Bolsonaro said social distancing and other measures suggested by the WHO are more harmful than the pandemic itself. Brazil is the worst affected country in the region by the pandemic. And in Chile, the World Health Organization has requested the government to determine a specific method to register COVID-19 death toll information. The request comes after several calls of Chilean health organizations over the current methodology to record COVID-19 death toll in the country, which is believed to differ from general guidelines made by WHO. Furthermore, the WHO has warned the current Chilean method prompts widespread disarrangements in order to focus efforts in new COVID-19 cases prevention. Chile has reported over 4,000 COVID-19 cases so far. Ecuador's public health situation continues to worsen amid COVID-19 pandemic. According to Health Ministry, a new 24-hour record has been set with 642 new cases. Total infections rates surpassed 45,000 patients on Thursday. The novel coronavirus has reached all regions of the country, with the cities of Guayaquil and Quito as the most affected. However, President Lenin Moreno has continued to push a reactivation of commercial activities. As we are seeing also in Ecuador, the health crisis caused by the new coronavirus has spilled over to the political sphere, where allegations of corruptions in the purchase of medical supplies have emerged. The minister of the government has tried to deflect the accusations by blaming the previous government.
It was not settled this year, nor 4 years ago. It is a mechanism that is so raw that despite a very hard fight against corruption, that despite examples where one would believe that the message has been already made clear. There is a former president of the Republic sentencing because Rafael Correa is sentenced. I wonder what message this society needs to understand that we must submit to the law.
And Panama's health ministry announced a new wave of infections with 697 new cases recorded in the last 24 hours. The total number of infections stands now at over 18,000, with 7,091 active cases and 11,077 recovered patients. The Ministry of Health has called on the population to continue implementing social distancing and hygienic measures. Meanwhile, the government has allowed commercial activities to restart. Like this, we go for a first break. Remember, follow us on Twitter at Telsur English and on my account at Laura P. Telsur. We'll be right back. We are back with our news. Floods and mudslides have uprooted hundreds of thousands of people from their homes and left dozens dead or missing. The natural disaster caused by torrential downpours led to the relocation of 230,000 people and the destruction of more than 1,300 homes. In 3,000 regions of China, at least 27 people have been killed or are missing. The Emergency Management Ministry has reported direct economic losses of more than 550 million due to the flooding. Security and rescue brigades have been deployed in Liuyuan coal mine after a gas accident at the mine located in Shanxi province in the country's southwest region. Rescue operations are underway after 7 coal miners lost contact following the incident. However, the rescue teams have been able to determine where the miners are located and are trying to reach them. The rescue teams has also reached out to families to keep them updated on the status of the missing miners. And the return of traffic to the streets, to the reopening of businesses and restaurants, and the return of thousands of people to work have been some of the signs in recent weeks that things are returning to normal in China's urban areas. Nevertheless, prevention continues to be a priority of citizens and authorities. Irancy Peraza from Beijing has the details. Welcome.
More than 4 months after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and despite that in Beijing the risk of contagion remains low, prevention measures remain in place. We see them in the majority of public spaces, where there are measures such as the points of taking temperature and the use of disinfectant and social distancing.
I prefer to continue taking care. I know that the situation is very controlled, but at least for a while we have to take precautions, because there could be outbursts and I don't want to catch it.
The requirement to use a mask has begun to be relaxed, mostly in open-air spaces. Citizens are being cautious, and nearly everyone continues to use them when they go out to the streets.
The mask continues being necessary. Chinese people are used to it for a long time now. It protects us.
Restaurants have also taken special measures and have kept tables separated. Drivers from some taxi services must upload videos to their internal platforms to demonstrate that they have disinfected their vehicles and are using gloves and masks.
With the arrival of summer, many people are already going to restaurants, but I'm only going to work. I prefer that.
The world requires rules and regulations for workplaces and social spaces following the coronavirus, and China, a country at the vanguard in the fight against COVID-19, looks to be the testing laboratory for what comes after the pandemic.
Irancy Peraza, Telesur, Beijing, China.
That's how new normal looks like. Also in China, they have accused the United States of provocative acts after U.S. military aircraft blew over Taiwan on Tuesday. The aircraft took off from a large U.S. military base in Japan, Okinawa Island, and flew over northern and western Taiwan on its way to Southeast Asia. China's Taiwan Affairs Office said it was an illegal act and a seriously provocative incident. It added that the aircraft harmed China's sovereignty, security, and development rights and contravened international law. Washington has also increased its Navy deployments through the narrow strait that separates Taiwan from China. Vietnam has now gone 8 weeks without reporting any new COVID-19 cases of local transmission. As confirmed by the National Commission in charge of containing the epidemic, in the past 56 days, the country has reported 192 coronavirus cases, all of which have been nationals who returned to the country from harder hit nations. 12 cases remain active, and Vietnam is one of the few countries in the world that has reported no COVID-19 fatalities, while the total number of cases reported is just 332. The most serious case reported is a 43-year-old British citizen who was hired as a pilot for Vietnam's airlines, who continues to recover from the disease. In Europe, a bomb explosion and a school bombing in Slovakia has left at least one person dead and several wounded. Police authorities reported on Thursday an attack on a primary school in the capital Bratislava. The attack left a member of staff dead and 5 other people injured. According to the security agents, the victim was the school's assistant principal, and they confirmed that several children were injured, together with a teacher who is in a serious condition. The police chief described the attacker as a 22-year-old former student of the school. He further noted that the assailtant stabbed several people and attempted to flee the scene, but was killed instantly. An investigation is underway to know the motives of the attacker. In the United States, the coronavirus is far from under control in the United States, for the early reopening of the economy having a devastating impact and an average of 1,000 Americans dying every day. Our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso, has the details. Welcome, Jorge.
Thank you. The coronavirus pandemic is still not under control, and there is agreement that the early reopening of the economy promoted for President Trump is created an impact. We're talking that 21 states are showing increases in the cases. We're talking that the figure of dead people, it's over 115,000. The cases are over 2 million. There's an average of 1,000 people, 1,000 Americans dying every day, and the forecast of the University of Harvard is showing that by September and another 100,000 people are going to be dead because of the pandemic. Dr. Fauci, that is the biggest expert in the pandemic, says that coronavirus is his worst nightmare, and the task force implemented by the White House in order to address has not been doing any briefing in over 1 month. And Vice President Trump, that is at the helm of that pandemic task force to respond to the coronavirus, has taken a picture of himself that later was removed very quickly from Twitter, that was showing himself in front of a group of people, collaborators from the campaign of Trump and Pence, about dozens of people, any of them without any mask, that is contravening the recommendations of the CDC, the Centers of Control of Diseases. Most definitely a big irony. We get back to you now.
Thank you, Jorge. And the director of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom, warned all countries to remain vigilant as the threat of COVID-19 resurgence remains high.
And we must also remember that although the situation is improving here in Europe, globally it's getting worse. We still have a long road ahead, and we will continue to need global solidarity to defeat this pandemic fully.
Like this, we go for another break. Remember, find this and more news on our website, clusterenglish.net. We'll be right back. We are back with our news. Preparations for the October's elections have been started in Ivory Coast. The country has launched an exercise to register votes. The Ivory Coast Independent Electoral Commission is targeting 5 million citizens who are eligible to vote but are not in the register. Elections are set to take place on the 31st of October.
I invite all of those who have recently become of age to come and enlist. This is very important. These people, when they have reached legal age at 18 years old, the law allows them to participate in electing the nation's governors. This is their opportunity to get their name on the electoral register so that they can choose the candidate they want on election day.
And Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa on Thursday received a medical shipment from China to help in the fight against COVID-19. The aid was delivered by the Chinese ambassador to the country, Guo Shaoshun. Zimbabwean President Mnangagwa expressed Zimbabwe's profound gratitude to China for the continued support of its fight against the pandemic. The new batch of assistance includes 165,000 surgical masks and more than 25,000 pieces of personal protective equipment. This is a clear demonstration of the comprehensive strategic partnership relationship between the two countries. And United Nations support mission in Libya has announced that both Libya's Government of National Accord and the Libyan National Army are engaged in the third round of joint ceasefire talks. The UN support mission in Libya said on Wednesday that it had convened a meeting with a delegation from military commander Khalifa Haftar Eastern-based forces on June 3rd, and another on Tuesday with a delegation from the international recognized Government of National Accord in Tripoli. Both meetings, which were conducted virtually, were productive and enabled us to discuss with the delegations the latest development on the ground, the mission said. The North African country, a major oil producer, has been mired in turmoil since 2011 when President Muammar Gaddafi was toppled in a UN-backed coup. Still in Africa, the number of coronavirus cases has surpassed 200,000, with more than 5,000 COVID-19 fatalities recorded across the continent. 10 out of 54 countries are currently driving the rise in numbers, accounting for nearly 80% of all the cases. More than 70% of the deaths have occurred in just 5 countries: Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, and Sudan. South Africa is the most affected, accounting for 25% of the continent's total cases, with higher numbers of cases and deaths daily. Over 90,000 people have across the continent been recovered from the virus so far. Ethiopia's parliament has approved an extra year of office for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed after August elections were postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. The upper house voted a resolution on Wednesday that extends the terms of federal and regional lawmakers as well as the executive branch of the government for between 9 and 12 months. The parliament speaker said the elections will only take place after health officials determine that the novel coronavirus is no longer a threat. And the death toll from a ship packed with sub-Saharan African migrants that sank off the Tunisian coast with this week has risen to 46. The first 20 bodies were found on Tuesday, with more recovered on Thursday. 53 people had set out on the vessel towards Italy over the weekend. Tunisian officials say an investigation has been launched into the incident. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency says attempts to reach the Italian coast from Tunisia were significantly higher in the first 4 months of 2020 than in the same period last year. And the Islamic Organization of Islamic Cooperation has once again denounced the Israeli government plan to annex Palestinian territory. Following a virtual meeting summit, members of the organization issued a joint statement in which they rejected Israel's move to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. The group went on to state that Tel Aviv would be responsible for any consequences that may arise, as it warned that member states would take political and legal measures to address the threats posed by Israel.
Any attempt to change the character and status of the Israeli-occupied Palestinian territory is void, has no legal consequence, and will therefore be confronted at all levels. This requires the formation of an international front to vigorously challenge the aggressive Israeli plans. We must take all possible political, legal, diplomatic, and economic measures to confront and isolate the Israeli colonial system.
Iraq and the United States are set to begin strategic talks aimed at re-establishing ties after months of tensions. Due to coronavirus travel restrictions, the first high-level talks in more than a decade will be held online. Discussions will center on the fate of the U.S.-led military coalition as well as economic and cultural ties. Tensions skyrocketed in January following a U.S. strike in Baghdad that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani.